Hello and welcome to this week's lesson on jQuery image enhancing. Once you download and open up the zip file I provided for you, you'll see that there's two HTML files in the folder and an images folder. Image rollover.html, it's a complete bit of code that has all the HTML, all the CSS, and all the jQuery to work. Let's look at it for a second. It just shows an image, and when you roll over it, it changes the source of that image to display another one. This is similar to a previous homework you did, and you'll see how I solved it following the example in your book. But what I really wanted to do today is work on the gallery rollover example in your chapter. Let's first of all see what's inside the images folder. For each image, these are all paintings by a painter called Franz Marc. I have a big version. For example, this one is called bluefox.jpg. It's 600 by 471. It's 135 kilobytes. And I have a smaller version, and I give it a name bluefox_thumb. It's exactly the same thing, but it's much smaller, 70 kilobytes, 100 by 79. So now let's look at what's inside the file called gallery rollover. So I'm going to drag that to the code editor. And here we are. By the way, first thing first, you might see the entire style section displayed. So what I did, I folded that code the last time I viewed this file. If you notice, you probably have the same feature in your own code editor. Notice these little arrows, sometimes it's dots on the left side. If I click on the little arrow that's next to the opening tag, opening style tag, I can fold the whole section of code. This is a very, very handy feature when you're developing, because you can keep all your code but have it out of the way so that you can just view the part of the code you're working on and just make it a little bit easier for you. So what's inside the body section? Forget about these wrappers, these divs with a deal wrapper and image wrappers. They're there only to present the images so they're centered. The important part are these two divs. The one with an idea of gallery, there's a bunch of images wrapped inside links, and another div with an idea large that has a larger version of the yellow cow image, which happens to be the first one. So let's look inside the gallery. First of all, let's look at this with a browser. So I'm going to double click on it. And here we are. So these are all my thumbnails. They're inside a div with an idea of gallery. And each one is wrapped in a link. So if I click, for example, on Blue Fox, it will take me to the larger version of this image. And here we are. In fact, it says bluefox.jpg. What I like to happen, instead of going to the larger version of that image on a different page, I like the larger version of this image to appear here, just like a typical gallery you see in many different websites. All right, so I want to code for that. So I'm going to come into the jQuery section. So I have everything in one file just to make it easier to demonstrate. But typically you want to separate your code like you've been doing. So if I'm going to put this in simple English, I'm going to try to spell it out. So I want for each image, I want a few things to happen. So I'm going to indent that. I want, first of all, to prevent the browser to follow the link. To follow the link. I also want to preload the larger version of this image. And we do that, if you read the chapter, you realize that when you have image swapping like that, there might be a delay that the user is going to experience, because the browser has to actually download that image. In our particular case, it might not matter because the file's not that huge, but if it was a really large image, then you would have a delay, and that's very unpleasant. So to prevent that problem, you preload images. And then I want to change the large image when hovering over thumbnail. And I want that to happen for each image. So there's a function to do that. First of all, what is going to be our selector? That's always the first thing. I want to make this happen for each image inside a div with an ID of gallery. And there we go, we have our selector. So $, inside the div with an ID of gallery, I want to select all the images. And for each one of them, so we're going to use the each function. I'm going to separate this like we usually do. And remember, you want to make this happen for every one of them. So I'm going to put the comments inside. All right, so like all the previous syntaxes that we've seen, we have to use function. We have to pass a function to this. It's not exactly an event, but it's a function within a function. So I'm going to have my parentheses and my curly braces. Then I'm going to separate these curly braces. And once again, I'm going to move all the comments inside, because I want this to happen for each image. So I got to, something's not quite right here. See, I want this to be on the same line maybe. There we go. It's a little bit more compact. All right. So let's start with the first bit of code. For each image inside the item with an ID of gallery, I want to prevent the browser follow the link that's wrapped around it. Right? So we're talking about each image, so I know I can use this. That means the image for each image. So it's going to start with the first image and second and third, and so it's going to do for each image. But how do I select? So I know how to select the image. It's just this. But how do I select the link that is wrapped around the image? I can use this function, which is called parent, that will retrieve the parent of this element. So in our case, it will retrieve the link. And I know that I want to associate an event, which is when somebody clicks on it. So what I'm saying, we're going to set up this code to work on hover, but you have to think that some people might click on the thumbnail. So you have to anticipate what the user is going to do. So if some users just going to hover, it's going to work just fine. If some users are actually going to click on a thumbnail, we do not want the user to be taken to the larger version of that image on a separate page. We want to stay on the same page. So we got to prevent that event to be fired. We know how to do that. So it's a click event, and we're going to pass a function inside, and inside the parent is going to enter event, because we're going to capture that event. They're going to enter our curly braces and separate the curly braces, and we're going to say prevent event, prevent default. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I want to see if I didn't make any mistakes so far. Let me separate this and just create a little bit more space. It's very, very important that we keep the code very clean and easy to visually immediately understand the different bits of code, different sections of the code. So I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to reload. So now when I click on any of these thumbnails, yes, I don't go anywhere, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen. I don't want the link to be followed by the browser. Okay, so far so good. So okay, second step, preload larger version of the image. Okay, so we want to preload the image. You've seen several examples. We know how to do that. We can create in a variable called large image, and we create it with the image constructor that creates an image object. Okay, and we want to set its source. So the large image source is going to be this, what's inside the link, the href inside the link. So what we're going to do, we're going to assign what's inside the href for the link to the source of the large image. So what we can do, we already have it here. Let's see, where is it? This parent this parent, and we're gonna use the attribute, and we're gonna get the href, if I only spelled it right. There we go. So what are we doing here? We're getting what's inside the href for this link or any link. So for the first case will be images yellow cow.jpg. For the second case will be images / red horses JPEG, and so forth. And we're going to put that as the source for the large image. Now, the first thing I want to do though, notice that we're repeating this parent. We have it twice, and we want to prevent that because every time jQuery has to look for an element like that, it takes time. So if you want to speed up your code, you want to prevent looking for the same thing more than once. So there's a neat little thing we can do. We can create a variable, I'm going to call it link, and we're going to make our parent. I'm going to copy that and paste it right here. And there we go. So this is a jQuery object, and we can just substitute it like that. Exactly the same structure. We're going to do the same thing down here. It's just a way to prevent jQuery from running a search twice. But if this is confusing for you, you can keep this syntax. It's really the same thing. This is just a little bit more polished and faster to run. Okay, so we got the large image source. Okay, and the next thing we have to do, change the large. Well, first of all, just to catch our errors, I'm going to display that alert, and I'm going to say large image source. I want to see what I get. It might be a confusing result because remember it's doing it for all the images. So let's reload. All right, so it gives me a bunch of stuff. Okay, so it tells me yes, so it's finding that. That's the first one. Second one is getting all of them. Perfect. All right, so I don't need to see all of them, but I know this is telling me exactly the exact address. So perfect, that's exactly what I wanted. So I can remove that alert, and I can move on to the next section of my code. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is a way of developing. So you do it in small chunks, and you always test. Finish a little chunk, test and see if it works. If it works, move on to the next chunk. It is really much more complicated to develop a whole bunch of code and then look for errors afterwards. So I know that these two sections are doing what I'm expecting them to do. All right, so I'm saying change large image when hovering over thumbnail. So now we're talking about the thumbnail. So and the thumbnail is, let's go down to the HTML. Well, the thumbnail is our image, so it's perfect. I can just use this because that's what we selected. Each image in a gallery, and the image has the images in the gallery are the thumbnails. All right, so I'm going to say this on hover. We have to pass two functions here. All right, so function 1, comma, function 2. Now I'm going to put them each on their own line. And I'm going to separate the curly braces. Everything organized and everything easy to see right away. What do we want to do when we hover over the thumbnail? We want to replace the source of the large image. So we have to get hold of the large image. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say, when we hover on, I'm going to say large. I'm going to select the element with an ID of large and the image inside there. What we're going to do, we are going to change its source. So when I use attribute, source, and we're going to set it equal to large image source. And when we hover away, we don't care to make anything happen. We can just leave because we don't need to change the large image. Even if you don't make anything happen when the second function, you still have to have it there. I'm just going to remove this empty line right here. So it has to be there, and if we wanted to, we could just have it all on one line so it doesn't take up as much space. But you still have to have it. So when we first hover over, or we mouse over the thumbnail, the source of the large image is going to be changed, and it's going to be equal to the href inside the link. So let's save that, and let me reload this. Okay, so if I go over here, nothing changes because that's the first one, but I see that I did something left hand side. What did I do? Large image attribute source. Oh yes, okay, wrong syntax. So you cannot use an equal, so this part right here actually has to go inside the parentheses. You have to use a comma and put that in, and then remove the equal sign. I just used the wrong syntax. I'm going to save that and come back to this and reload. There we go. So when we hover over the first one, nothing happens. When we hover over the second one, instantaneously the image changes because we use the href inside the link, and that leads to the larger image. So it's pretty clever solution, and this is also called unobtrusive JavaScript, because in case somebody would have JavaScript not active, deactivated, they can, when they click over the thumbnails, they can actually get to a page that shows the larger image. So it wouldn't look as pretty, but it still would be functional. So that is the basic rollover effect, but we can get a little bit more sophisticated than that. So what we want to do, instead of just having the image being replaced immediately like that, we can create a softer effect by fading it in. So we're going to be working inside this function, and I'm going to comment out this bit of code. I'm not going to keep it there just for reference. And I'm going to spell out what I'm going to do. I want to fade out current large image and remove it. I want to create a new large image and insert it into the div ID of large. And then I want to fade it in. Fade in new large image. Okay. So to fade out the current large image and remove it, I got to select it first. So I'm going to select the large image. I'm going to fade it out, and I'm going to choose to do that over 1 second so it's a bit softer. And once it's faded out, I'm going to add another method, and I'm going to remove it. Let's see what I did here. So now when I go over any of these thumbnails, that image is faded out pretty quickly. Well, nothing happens because you have to keep on building more code. All right, so I have to create a new large image, and let's do that first. So we're going to create a variable. I'm going to call it new image. And it's going to be a jQuery element. So I got to use the $ and parentheses, and inside the jQuery element parentheses, I'm going to create an image element, just the regular HTML tag with a source of, we haven't decided yet what. And I'm just going to close that. And that's going to be, I'm going to have to adjust that because I have to be able to put something inside these quotes. I can also use the alt tag, but I'm not going to do it for this demonstration. It's spelled out in your book, I believe. So what I'm going to do, inside these quotes, I have to give it the large image source. Okay, but this is a string, so I've got to separate it. So I'm going to terminate my string there, and I'm going to add something. and that's another string. What's going to go in between the plus signs is the large image source. So I'm going to copy that. There we go. So this new image that's being created, it's a regular HTML image, and its source is equal to the source of the large image. Okay, so that's first I have to create a new large image, and now I have to insert it inside large. So I got to choose the element with an ID of large, and I want to insert it. So I can use different ones, but I'm going to choose to use prepend. That will add HTML just so if what I'm talking about is div, we're gonna do a large. What we did, we faded out this current image and removed it. Now I have to replace this with a new image tag. I will, for this particular case, I'm not supplying the all tag and I'm not supplying the height. I could do that, but I just don't want to do for the demonstration. So I'm going to put inside prepend, it's going to be all of this. And it's saved in a variable called new image. And I want to fade it in. Now remember, I cannot just fade in the new image. I cannot just do new image fade in. Because when I create it like that, when I add it like that, it's immediately visible. So I got to first hide it and then I fade it in. So I'm going to first hide it. And now it will fade in. And I'm going to fade it in at the same speed that I'm fading the other one out, so that there could be no interruption there for the viewer point of view. And let's see if I did everything correctly. So I fade out the current large image and remove it. I create a new large image, and now I'm going to insert inside the element with the of large. So it's going to be here. This tag is going to go right there. It'll be simpler than that. We'll only have the source. But the code you insert with jQuery is not validated, so it really doesn't matter. If we were to use the alt tag to display the title, then definitely I would want to have it. And if the size of the image would not be exactly the same as the size of the previous image, I would definitely have to add a height attribute, and you can do that with attributes. And height. So that's the second step, and now I'm fading in the large image, but to be able to fade it in, it has to be hidden, so I hide it first and then I fade it in. Save that, and if I did not make any mistakes, here is our first image. So when I go over this, it fades in, and we can do that even more slowly. You don't even notice that the other one is being faded out. There's just a fraction of a second that there's nothing there. But it's very smooth effect. If we want even smoother, let's change those numbers, and instead of 1 second, we're going to make it 2 seconds. Might be a little bit softer. And a little bit softer, and you can play around with that as much as you want to. So that's it for the demonstration. So it gives you a sense of how an image gallery is created. But for your assignment, I'm asking you to do something different. I'm asking you to follow the instructions in your textbook and download FancyBox. So this is an example of FancyBox. So you're going to have a gallery. You can set up the way you want to. When you click on one of them, this is going to happen. Let me get rid of Firebug here. So this is a typical light box example. The background is darkened. This happens to be also a slideshow. So if I don't do anything, I set it up to be a slideshow. I don't know why it has that, why it's moving slightly to the left. I have no idea why. But this was done with FancyBox. So when you click on something, it shows you the image, and then when you hover over that, you have these indicators that you can click on to forward the images. You might not have the little jump it has. I have no idea. I must have added something that created that, or maybe it just comes with FancyBox. In either case, if that happens to you, that's not to worry. And I think that's it for today. Until next week.